Good morning. I'm continuing with my series on Paul Morphy in the first American Chess Congress from 1857. Morphy here is playing it black in his third game against Alexander Meek. The rules were that it was the first to three, not the best of five, first to three in first to three wins in every round except the final where it was the first to four or five, can't remember. But anyway, Meek, with the white pieces, plays e4. He's 2-0 down. Morphy wins this, he's through. Morphy plays e5, and Meek plays knight f3. Morphy plays knight c6 to defend the pawn, so they've both got one piece out. They've both got reasonable control over central squares. And Meek plays d4, Scotch game, very popular at that time, and Morphy takes. It's the best move. There is no real way to no really decent way to decline taking the pawn. So the pawn comes to c3, the Gøring gambit, a favourite of mine. What does Morphy do with the Gøring gambit? He takes the pawn, and Meek takes back with his knight. So you can see he's given up a pawn, but he's gotten two pieces out against one. Well, he's already a piece up in development, but yeah, he has a strong grip on the centre and a lead of one developmental move. Morphy, direct as ever, c5, bishop c5, right, a direct attack on the weakest point in black's game, the f2 pawn. And Meek returns the favour with bishop to c4, which I think is a, very good move. d6, yeah, stopping the pawn from coming here and allowing his bishop access to the game. h3, yeah, I don't like this really. You've played a gambit to get faster development and a good grip on the centre, and you start playing defensive moves like h3, and yeah, it's not certain that the knight will be coming to g5. Obviously, if it did get a knight to g5, it would be a very good position, but it's not certain that the knight is coming to g5, and it just seems a bit time wasting. But he has played the Gøring gambit, so we can't accuse him of being meek as I did in yesterday's game. So, of course, Morphy's going to develop another piece, and he plays bishop to d6, e6 even. And the bishop comes to b5. Now, the bishop could have come to b5 immediately rather than b4. So it's not just that he's given up a good diagonal to the bishop. It's also the case that now Morphy is in a position to develop his last piece, and then White's developmental advantage has disappeared, and his strong grip on the centre isn't so very strong that it's worth a pawn. So Morphy, of course, develops with knight to e7 to defend the knight so that his structure cannot be damaged. And Meek, okay, maybe he's going after the bishop here to get the two bishops. Reasonable, but it is still moving the same piece for the second time in the opening, which is a no-no. And Morphy calmly carries on with the best developing move in chess, which is the castle. Why is it the best developing move? Because it develops the rook, puts the king in safety, and yeah. So you're doing two things at once. Economy, great, I love it. So the queen comes to h5. Now this would be good. If the bishop was on c4, then it's a good attack. If the bishop wasn't on d6, then it's a good attack. But in this position, he isn't really threatening to take this pawn. And so, you know, it isn't very good really. And Morphy plays h6, and the knight goes back. And now he's it's wasting more time. The knight has used 2 moves to go back where he is, and not only that, but that knight on f3 cuts off Black's best line, White's best line of retreat for the queen. Why do I say line of retreat for the queen? Because even although he was attacking, since his attack isn't going to be effective, the main thing to think about is, can that queen be trapped on h5? And, certainly easier to trap it when one of its lines of retreat is cut off. So, Morphy plays knight to g6. He might be looking at coming, knight to f4 is one way to attack the queen. Alright, it's not going to work at the minute because the bishop is defending. Okay, so, but it's also the case that, it does have a certain downside, which is that White can take the knight on c6 and damage Morphy's pawn structure. I would still favour Morphy in this position, even if he takes the knight. But he doesn't do that. He plays g4, opening up lines of attack to his king horribly. And Morphy plays the main point of knight to g6, which is to play the knight to e5, defended by the other knight, so as he gets to establish a knight on this lovely square e5. And now not only is a pawn down and behind in development, but his strong centre has disappeared, and it's actually Morphy who has good control over the centre. And he's threatening to take the knight, an intolerable threat. So the knight has to take. And a bit of a surprise for Morphy, I think, from Morphy, sorry. I think all of us would be playing here knight takes knight. It just makes sense. But no, Morphy plays pawn takes knight to open up a line against the king and to support the knight coming to g5, f4 even. So yeah, unusual, but I'm not going to argue with Morphy. It's the right decision. It has to be g5. Oof. Yeah, at least it wasn't a Meek performance from Meek. Queen comes to d4, threatening to take on f2. It doesn't checkmate. The king's got d1, but then the rook's going to come here. Maybe he can block with the knight, but then the knight is going to get chased with the pawn, and it's a disaster for black. So of course he can't allow that's happening. He plays bishop c3, a good move. It threatens the queen, it defends the pawn, and it forces the queen to move. The queen moves to b4, threatening the pawn on b2, and threatening maybe to take on e1, e3, and really damage the structure and win the pawn on b2 as well. Or if he defends the pawn by moving the rook, or by pushing the pawn, or by castling long, none of those moves are any good, then Morphy can take here and destroy the pawn structure for White. But Meek doesn't do any of these things. He plays bishop takes bishop. And Morphy, well, again, we're all going to play queen takes rook, queen takes bishop, and recapture, and still enjoy a good position. Still look forward to playing knight here to f4, and then maybe knight here check to prevent queen in at any time. But Morphy isn't the kind of player who automatically does things. he takes instead on b2, and he's threatening the rook, and he's threatening the knight. So if Meek takes the rook, Morphy takes the rook, and when the king moves, he takes the other rook. Obviously, you can't let that happen. So Meek castles. Yeah, fair enough. Morphy takes he doesn't save the rook, he takes the knight. So he's given up in exchange. Bishop takes the rook, and the rook takes the bishop. Now, time to see how we evaluate this situation for both sides. Well, just talking evaluation first. Yeah, admittedly, white is an exchange up, but let's face it, pretty soon the knight is coming to f4 and threatening the queen, and then the knight is going to come to h3, say check, and pick up a pawn or two, depending on how it's played, and then he's going to have 7 pawns against 3, 4 pawns and a knight for a rook. We'd take that any time, but over that, the position is just so simple for Morphy to play, so simple to keep directly attacking, whereas black is going to struggle to find good moves here. So, take a minute, stop the video if need be, and think what you think the evaluation says here. I'll give you a minute and I'll say what I think the evaluation says, and then we'll check with our silicon friend, the stockfish. Okay, I hope you've all had a go. Remember, there's no wrong answers. It's practice to make you better at evaluating positions. An essential skill of a chess player is to be able to evaluate a position correctly. I'm going to say this position is about plus 2.3 for black, or minus 2.3 as it will say. Okay, let's see. No, just minus 1.19. Okay. Put in the comments if you've done better than me. And I'll probably call you a show off. No, put in the comments if you've done better than me. But even if you didn't get nearer, doesn't matter. It's the practice which counts. So, yeah. The rook comes to c1. And Morphy doesn't bother defending the f-pawn. He could have played queen here and defended the c-pawn, sorry. He could have played, but he goes rather on the attack himself. And bishop comes to c4, offering a trade. But Morphy, of course, doesn't take the trade. He's got a good in-betweener. He does. No, he doesn't. Yes, he plays knight to f4, forking the queen and pawn, and as we can see, the pawn is attacked twice, so even if he tries to defend it, it's not going to work for him. So, Meek plays queen back to d1. Again, wasting time. His queen is back where it started. Yeah. What did it actually do on h4, h5 when it went there 11 moves ago? Nothing. An empty threat. And you've not got time to mess about. Morphy takes the pawn with check. King comes to g2. I would be very tempted to take the pawn on g4 and then be playing with 4 pawns for my knight and rook. But then, you know, yeah, I'm not Morphy, so what do I know? Because he doesn't play that. He plays knight to f2, which f4, sorry, which is a really good square for the knight. Maybe he's thinking about capturing with the pawn on g4. So, the king moves to h1. Queen comes to b6. Yeah, not capturing the pawn. Seems content to let his opponent take the pawn, open it, expose his king and get a check. But yeah, I do think Morphy is in a much better position here, so he can maybe afford that. G takes h6, and Morphy takes on c4, so that he is in a position to take the pawn with check, saving himself a tempo. Clever, clever. But Meek doesn't let him do that. He wasn't anywhere near as meek in this game as he was in yesterday's game, and he plays h7 check. Now, I would be very tempted to play king to h8 and hide behind the pawn, but Morphy knows what he's doing, and one advantage of the move that Morphy plays, which is to take the pawn, is that the rook can come to here, and the king can come to here, and say check, possibly. So yeah, that's one advantage of the way Morphy plays it. Queen comes to g4 to try and launch a counter-attack. So queen comes to h6 and says check, and king comes to g1. And bishop takes, and he's got his exchange back. And now he's just a piece and several pawns up. And the rook comes to d8. He's threatening to come to d6 and then g6. And yeah, that will be all Shiro. I don't know why Meek plays on, but he does. And he comes to d6. Pawn comes to f3. Rook comes to g6. And he plays king to f2. And it says, it says in the comments here, after this was the last move in the game, it says Mr. Morphy mates in 3 moves. See if you can find that yourself. See if you can find a mate in 3 moves yourself. So I think at that time in the 1850s, it was quite common that people would end the game in this position by saying, "It's mate in 3 now, whatever you do." You know, and then it might be recorded at the end, Morphy announced mate in 3. Find it yourself. It's a good little exercise. You know, it isn't actually very difficult to find the mate in 3, but yeah, be pleasing if you find a Morphy mate. And so Morphy won the 3rd game and was now through to the 3rd round after beating Alexander Meek 3-0. So in the 3rd round, you will be meeting Lichtenhain, who's responsible for a line in the Urusov Gambit. Yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share. Especially make a comment if you've done better than me with the evaluation. Yeah, thanks. Bye.